I'm Derri, and I have read it before. Today, I'm going to return to my Warband. My Warband. I'm going to do this as a set of videos because a lot of these characters aren't part of series that are being discussed a lot on YouTube. So, the next position in my Warband is Champion. And I'm not going to talk about the series this character is from because if you don't know about this character, where have you been? That is the first law series, meaning that my champion is Logan Ninefingers. Because let's face it, the guy has 100% record and I wouldn't want to come up against him. Because things get dicey, the bloody 9 shows up and that bastard's not letting you leave. Which brings me to the character whose books I am going to talk about today. And that character is my Councillor. And for this, I didn't have to think for very long. He is a character from one of my most beloved series. It's not Realm of the Elderlings. It's not Discworld. It's from the Empire series by Raymond Feist and Janny Wurts. And this is a companion series to the Rift War Saga trilogy books that began with Magician that Raymond Feist wrote. You do not have to have read any of those books to enjoy the Empire trilogy. And that's the first question I ever get asked, and strangely people are never quite convinced. But you absolutely can read this trilogy as a standalone trilogy. The reason that I have chosen this person as my Councillor, he is not a protagonist in this series. He is an antagonist from very early on in the piece, and to an effect that you don't realise how much impact he has had on the story until about halfway through the second book. And his name is Chumaka, and he is the first advisor and spy master of one of Mara's greatest rivals. He is an incredibly intelligent and talented man, and he just basically loves the intellectual challenge of outsmarting everybody. That's who I want as my Councillor in my Warband. So, to talk about the series. Empire is the spin-off novel from the Magician and Rift War series, and it's based on the other world of that Rift War that you get mostly from the primary world. This was the first fantasy series I read that wasn't medieval European based, that wasn't Tolkien-esque. It's got a very Japanese feel to it, and it is following our main character Mara, who we meet as a very young girl. Well, not that young. She's a teenage girl when we meet her, and it's about how she manages to bring her family back, basically from just about being wiped off the council game and regaining the power that her family once held and eventually surpassing that. And at a very basic level, that's what these books are about, is Mara and her house Akoma going from less than 50 warriors to a force to be reckoned with within the Empire. She has to face a lot of opposition because she's a woman for a start, and it's a very patriarchal society. She has less than 50 soldiers, and when we first meet Mara, she has very few assets to help her. Thankfully, the ones that she does have are smart. She has good people. We see an intelligent response to the situation her family has been left in. And the reason that that's important is in the culture that this takes place in. If you are a member of a great family, you have estates, you have servants, you have slaves, they're a thing. It gets dealt with through the trilogy, don't panic. If you're a member of this ruling family, then you are responsible for thousands of lives who are all on your shoulder. You're responsible for all of them. If the ruling family of a house is killed or wiped out for whatever reason, all of the servants become slaves. All of the warriors become what they call grey warriors, who can't go to another house to get work, to be looked after. They become bandits, essentially. Nobody wants them. So it's critical for her to protect the people that are left and strengthen what she can. And that's the story. The reason it becomes really interesting is that she's up against some fascinating enemies. And they all come at her in very different ways. The politics of the situation are high stakes. Assassins are a big deal in these books. She individually has to deal with a number of assassination attempts, and some of them get really close. The opponents she faces genuinely attack her house on every level. There's a little bit of magic in the series, not a lot. There is a brief few scenes with magicians towards the end of the first book, and the second half of the last book has a lot to do with magicians, because at that point she's even facing opposition from the magicians, because she's pushing back against her society's use of slaves and the stagnation in her culture, because that is part of her arc, is helping her culture move forward. Characters, who's in it? Mara, obviously. She's our main character. She begins as a late teen, and by the time we finish with her, she's in, I think, her 40s. But she's lived a life, that's for sure. And we follow her through all of the ups and downs in her house, and we face with her all of her adversaries. She has a great team around her. She has the leader of her armies, Kaoki, who is an exceptionally capable warrior. And the only reason that she still has him is he was part of that small band of about 50 warriors that her father managed to get back to her before he was killed. She has a household factor, sort of like a seneschal or a man of affairs. He handles the business side of the Akoma, and so he maintains their assets, their estates. He takes care of stock purchases, servants, that kind of carry on. She has Nakoya. Nakoya is her first advisor, and she promoted Nakoya to be her first advisor because she had so few people when she gained her title. There wasn't an advisor, and Nakoya had been involved in court life all her life, so she's an older lady and used to be Mara's nurse. So she's an odd person to have in that position, but she also has been watching this cultural political situation her whole life from the outside, so she's got a unique viewpoint on it. And the final member of her central council is Arakasi, and Arakasi is brilliant. He is her information person. He is her spy master, and he is incredibly good at his job, and he maintains this network of spies and is able to prepare Mara for most of the things that face her. She's able to respond to those threats appropriately without being caught by surprise, with very few exceptions. And that's her inner circle. We do get a perspective from a slave that she becomes romantically involved with in the second book, and that's a very important relationship because, again, it's that external view of her own culture, and it gives her genuine insight into why this completely culturally indoctrinated slavery is a bad thing, and no, it isn't the will of the gods, and no, you're a person and you're doing this to other people. So that relationship has a very great impact on who she is as a person. And that's her inner circle. Outside of her, we meet quite a few characters. She as the head of the Akoma household, has a blood feud going with another great house, and they're a more powerful house than she is. So she's always on the back foot dealing with this family. And that family goes through a number of changes to the head of that household, and she has to adjust how to react to that each time there's a change. And so we get the father, the son, and the nephew as the leader of the house during the timeline of the books. All of them are very different, and all of them very much provide different threats. We do get the occasional POV from those characters, and even though we don't get a lot of insight from those characters, they're pretty well fleshed out just from what we get in the POVs that we have in Mara's camp. And that's in the Minwanabi household. And so the Akoma and the Minwanabi are known throughout their culture to have this blood feud. And other people show their support by other means. She also has an issue with the Anasati, and she deals with that a number of different ways. And the character for my warband is part of the Anasati household. We do get occasional viewpoints from the Anasati household, particularly in later books as they become directly oppositional. And we get the occasional viewpoint from members of the Magicians' Assembly. And that's not to say there's a lot of magic. I've touched on that, there isn't. But we do get to know a little bit of the political interplay within the Magicians, because that has a bearing on the way things go. Some of the other things that are part of the trilogy, we have a coexisting species within this empire, and to my mind they're giant ants. They are six-legged, they have segmented bodies, they have mandibles, they have different ranks of males where they have worker males and army elves and warrior soldier ants and drones, and two different kinds of females, breeding female being the queen and lesser females who just lay eggs. So they're very ant-like. They are a hive mind. They do live in a hive, and one of those hives is on the Akoma estates, and so Mara develops a friendship with the queen of the hive, and she very much enjoys getting that different point of view, and that works to her benefit substantially. There is political intrigue in these books up the wazoo, and it is high stakes. They will send assassins and you will die, and if you die, all of those people who rely on you are screwed. We're talking high stakes. There is a cult of religious assassins. Basically, they are a death cult. They're in it. They're a factor to deal with. So you've got political machinations. There's a lot of battlefronts around the empire, because that's one of the ways that these great families maintain their positions within the empire. Some of these battles are utterly meaningless, but continue because of tradition and the way their culture works. And fighting that tradition and the way their culture works is what begins to drive Mara's arc once she stabilises the safety of her family. The characters are great, the political intrigue is astoundingly good. The spying, the intrigue, just all of the good things, basically. There's assassins, there are giant ants, there's desert campaigns. Like, they're in my top 5 as far as all-time series. And they have good audiobooks, like really good. I really like them. And yeah, I think the only thing it's missing as far as fantasy goes is combat. Because Mara is a ruling lady, she's never involved in battle. I mean, she's a figurehead when her armies go to war. She doesn't go and fight. That's not to say she doesn't have to defend herself several times, because assassins. I hope that you enjoy them. I hope that you do pick them up and that you enjoy them, because they are particularly good. I'm going to go now and have lunch, so I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll see you next time.